Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. I sure am glad to have you with me. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program with me today. Y'all, I say all the time that I love live radio. I'm if you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the podcast link. We put the show up. We divide it into 3 hours. We found people like it that way more than just one massive file. You can also get the live stream. So anywhere in the world you are, you can click the link and listen to me. And the noon to 3 show then repeats all the way until noon the next day on the stream. So you can find ways. But, man, live radio, because I like to cover the news. I like to cover the news as it happens. And you can listen to my podcast next week from today, and you'll miss a lot of stuff, or it won't be timely to you in the way live radio is on your local radio station. And this is a great example. I was going to talk about the 2024 election. We now have our candidates. Trump and Biden are going to be the nominees. I will talk about that. I will take your calls, 877-973-7425. But first, we have breaking news. That's the cool part of live radio, is I hit the microphone at 12. I know what I'm going to talk about. Breaking news happens. Got to shake up the show. Got to make a bunch of phone calls, do a rapid deep dive, and here we go. The witch hunt in Georgia is completely being unraveled. That would be the Fani Willis case against Donald Trump. The judge, Scott McAfee, has tossed 6 charges in the indictment. Now, there are 41 total charges. 6 of them are tossed. It relates to 3 of 13 felony counts that Donald Trump faces, but more particularly, it focuses on Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, and Mark Meadows. And this helps Donald Trump by undermining the causes of RICO. Now, let me step back and explain this one to you again. Full disclosure, if you're new to the show, I was a lawyer in Georgia. I maintained my bar license, actually, in the state of Georgia. I stay inactive. I just work too hard to toss it away. I work too hard to do it. If I were to give up my law license, God forbid I had to go back to be a lawyer, I would take the bar exam again. So I have held on to my license. It is inactive, but I was a lawyer in the state of Georgia. And unlike Nathan Wade, the special prosecutor, I have done RICO cases in the state of Georgia. Nathan Wade, the special prosecutor who's going to prosecute the RICO case against Donald Trump, has never done RICO cases. I have actually done 2 RICO cases in my law practice. Now, they were civil RICO, not criminal RICO, but it's the same pattern and practice within the law. So let me explain to you the Racketeering Influence Act. I always forget what RICO stands, Corrupt Organization, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act. RICO is a federal law that the states embraced, and Georgia expanded RICO. So RICO has a category of crimes. And think of building a building here. Every building has a foundation. When you're building a RICO case, your foundation is called a criminal enterprise. You have a bunch of people working to advance a criminal enterprise. And they do different things. Now, this is why RICO came about. It was designed to go after the mafia. It's been turned to use on gangs, which are kind of the successor organizations of the mob in certain areas. But you had, for example, in mobs, you had the people who were going down Main Street shaking down businesses for cash. Over at the port, you had people overseeing the drug trade coming in and leaving the port. Uptown, you had blackmail organization with elected officials. And then downtown, you had an underground gambling operation. All of the money from all of those flowed back into the criminal enterprise of the mafia family. And they were individual separate acts. So you go round up the extortionists on Main Street shaking down the businesses. They're unrelated to the people at the port. They have no knowledge of the people at the port who are running the drugs, who have no knowledge of the people uptown blackmailing the politicians, who have no knowledge of the people downtown who are operating the underground gambling operations. They're all independent, separate. They have no knowledge of each other, but they all work for the same criminal enterprise. They all work to advance the goal of the mafia family, which is a comprehensive crime. So the federal government came up with RICO, which takes all of those individual acts and ties them all together by saying, though they are disparate, independent, unrecognizably different categories of crimes, all of these independent categories of crimes and all the people involved with no knowledge of each other all have underlying knowledge of the underlying criminal enterprise, and so they're all tied to that foundation, and therefore they can all be prosecuted together as one massive criminal conspiracy. Georgia expanded RICO to include a bunch of additional crimes beyond, I think it's 14 or 17 federal crimes, extortion, blackmail, and other things all tied in. In Georgia, there are other things, false statements and tampering with elections, things like that, and they're coming after Donald Trump and all these other people with that. So the underlying foundational criminal enterprise is an attempt to steal the election. Now, it's very ironic because Donald Trump claims his actions were because the election was stolen and he was trying to unsteal the election. The state of Georgia maintains the election was not without problems, but a lawful legal election. And the courts agree, and Donald Trump trying to upend that was an attempt to criminally undermine the electoral processes of the state of Georgia. Now, in this regard, down in South Georgia, a group of people went in to try to seize a voting machine and the records of the voting machine and the files related to the voting machine to show that the voting machines could be used to rig the election. They did not have authorization and broke the law in so doing, and that was tied to the criminal enterprise of throwing out the election. Mark Meadows is accused of participating to bring people together for the commissions of the crime, among other things, and pressuring people on Donald Trump's behalf. I think the charges against Mark Meadows are garbage, but they're being pursued. Mark Meadows was just operating as the chief of staff to the president, arranging meetings for the president of the United States. In another situation, someone completely different from the people in Coffee County, not related to and unknown to Mark Meadows, harassed an election worker in Fulton County, Georgia. And all of these things are tied to Donald Trump because they're all part of the supposed criminal enterprise. There's a problem, though. And the biggest issue is that in a criminal trial, you must provide specificity to the charges. You must provide specificity because you got to remember, in American criminal courts, every issue is given the benefit to the defendant. The defendant is presumed innocent, not guilty. The standard for conviction is beyond a reasonable doubt. You can have no reasonable doubt about it. The defendant doesn't have to testify against himself. When he does testify, he can take the Fifth Amendment to not say anything criminally culpable against himself. If married, a spouse cannot be required to testify against a spouse. It's spousal immunity. We try to have the fairest trial possible. It's deeply ironic in the case of Donald Trump, so many people on the left who otherwise want fair, reasonable trials are demanding that the rules be dispensed with because they're so convinced of Donald Trump's guilt. They don't want to treat Donald Trump like any other defendant, and they justify it. Say, well, he is like no other defendant. It's an extraordinary case of someone trying to undermine our democracy. We shouldn't give him the constitutional rights, which means he wins by showing them to be the authoritarians that they claim him to be. What have I always said? Donald Trump's singular superpower? He gets other people to behave in the way they say he behaves. Not that he does, but the way they believe he behaves, they wind up behaving the same way. It's his superpower. Scott McAfee, the judge, found that as written, the allegations that Donald Trump and his friends solicited Georgia officials to violate their oaths of office were too generic. He says the lack of detail concerning an essential legal element is fatal. Now, he's allowing them to appeal or to revise the statements, but essentially just saying that they wanted these people to violate their oath of office. How? How did they wish these people to violate their oath of office? Now, this has nothing to do with, and he has not yet ruled on the issue of Fani Willis and Nathan Wade's relationship. But this is a setback because they're going to have to revise the case if they want to move forward with these. Now, it doesn't undermine RICO. He's found that they've got plausible paths to pursue a RICO case, just not with these 6 claims. But still, it shows you the recklessness with which they put it together. We were sold a case that was careful and deliberate and well-reasoned, and before the judge we're finding it was not so. Now, later we're going to get into Congresswoman Dean. Congresswoman Dean from Pennsylvania was at the Robert Hur hearing yesterday, and she said she understood that Robert Hur had asked Joe Biden the month of his son's, not the year, but the month of his son Beau Biden's death. And he not only got the month right, he got the day right. And doesn't that directly contradict Robert Hur? Robert says, ma'am, you're going to have to cite the record because I don't believe that's the case. She says, this is what I heard. This is what I heard. Yeah, she watched MSNBC where they made these wild claims. And this is the sort of stuff we're getting from this case out of Fulton County, where you watch MSNBC, you come away mentally defective. MSNBC breaks people's brains. For a network that wrings its hands over misinformation and disinformation, the amount of people lying to the audience on MSNBC is overwhelming. They have willfully mischaracterized the Robert Hur situation. They have willfully mischaracterized the RICO case in Georgia. And people who watch MSNBC must be regularly stunned every day when the revelations come out in the press and the case has little pieces of it thrown away because they were convinced it was an airtight, damnable case against Donald Trump, and yet the judge keeps picking it apart. It was always rushed. This is from Politico. The judge emphasized that Fani Willis's allegations in the indictment don't explain precisely how the defendant sought to violate the state and federal constitutions, the latter of which, he noted, contains hundreds of clauses, any one of which can be the subject of a lifetime study. They do not give the defendants enough information to prepare their defenses intelligently, as the defendants could have violated the constitutions and thus the statute in dozens, if not hundreds, of distinct ways. Then some of the dismissed counts apply to specifically Ray Smith and Robert Cheeley, 2 of the lawyers who worked on the false elector report. Georgia standards for indictment are strict and require dismissal of a charge containing any ambiguity, while under federal law, defendants can get further detail on a charge through other means. McAfee said this renders his state's courts less efficient, but he's obliged to follow state legal precedent on the issue. His quote, "This is an area of the law where federal courts have achieved greater efficiency, and one might wish that future grand jurors could be spared this inconvenience for something so easily remedied." But nonetheless, stickler for the law, he's throwing out 6 of the charges related to 3 felonies tied to Donald Trump because they were ambiguous. They were rushed. You didn't hear this in many of the legal prognosticators on television because they're all in the tank for the prosecution. They want Donald Trump buried under the jail. Meanwhile, the judicial process works. And that, by the way, before I get out of here, let me just reiterate this. The legal process is working. It may not work well in New York for Donald Trump, but in Georgia, it's working well. In the federal courts, it's working well for Donald Trump. We have a process. It's called due process. And it gives the defendants the benefit of the doubt in so many situations. And prosecutors really have to have airtight cases. If they don't, they get penalized in court. And that's happening in Georgia. This is just proof, not that the judge is in the tank for Trump, but that the system as written and designed to favor defendants to ensure a fair trial is working. And that should give you some faith in the judicial system in the United States. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. As always, if you text DATA to 33777, you can sign up for the daily email, get a discount as well on that. I don't know if you've heard this or not. Remember the media-gasm over the State of the Union? Those Republicans, they're totally debunked now. Joe Biden's got the stamina. I mean, you heard that from reporters. You heard that from the pundits. They were giddy. The Democrats were giddy. Oh, Joe Biden, he hit it out of the park. What did I tell you? What did your host tell you? As I told you, it was designed to solidify his support with Democrats. It was designed to solidify his support with Democrats, even at the expense of everyone else. He had to get Democrats to fall in line, particularly the progressive Democrats. And I said the day after the speech that he risked further alienating the blue-collar workers, part of the Democratic coalition, who are non-white, by being so tied to the progressive base. That old man yelling at all of us to get off his lawn for an hour and a half was counterproductive. I told you all of this after the State of the Union. And members of the media, they said, no, Erickson, you don't know what you're talking about. You're so broken by partisanship. It's what he needed to do. Well, we have the new polling out. Joe Biden has hit a new low. His popularity is negative 19.2% down. It's 56.5% disapprove, 37.4% approve. It's a drop from the State of the Union. He damaged himself after the State of the Union. For perspective, on this day, 1,148 days in office, Donald Trump's net approval rating was down 12. George H.W. Bush was down 8. Harry Truman down 8. Obama up 1. George W. Bush up 3. Even Jimmy Carter was up 7. But Biden down 19.2%. Didn't work. Dead cat bounce. Not even bounce. Y'all, I got to tell you about my bank, Old Glory Bank. They got a lot they want me to tell you. Let me just tell you this about them. They actually are my bank. They're an advertiser here because I started pushing them to advertise because I think they are a great bank and I want the world to know about it. And I'm happy to have them advertise. Why are they a great bank? They're a great bank because they have a banking bill of rights that you can go to oldglorybank.com and see for yourself. They're not going to cancel your account because they are opposed to you buying guns out of your bank account. They're not gonna give your information to the federal government. They're not going to sell your information to parties to monitor and track you. They have a banking bill of rights. They believe in culturally conservative values, and they stand up for them. You can bank with them like I do at oldglorybank.com. I set up an account online at oldglorybank.com. Took me less than 8 minutes. I'm getting one for my kids as well. Got one for my kids because they have no fees on the checking and savings account, and they have a great interest rate on their savings account. Oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. It really is my bank, and I love them. You will too. Greetings. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, happy to have you. I want to go to the phones here to AJ. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Eric. Thanks for all you do. Quick question. Just like to know if you think there's any RFK type ticket that would threaten take enough votes away from the Trump campaign or Trump presidency.
You know, I got to say, I was originally concerned about RFK hurting Trump more than Biden, given that a lot of the people I know who are RFK supporters are vaccine people who distrust the government from COVID, blame Trump for the vaccine. But the data suggests actually he is beginning to hurt Joe Biden more than he is hurting Donald Trump. And there's some level of frustration actually out there now about RFK hurting Joe Biden. Democrats very concerned. So, for example, let's just take the polls between the two of them. If you just have a Trump versus Biden race, I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics polling average. If you just have a Trump versus Biden race, Donald Trump wins by 2.4%. If you add Robert Kennedy to the mix, Donald Trump wins by 4.3%. He goes up 2 points in a multi-way race, whether you include now Robert Kennedy or also add Cornel West. Donald Trump does between 4 and 5 points better. So very clear that Kennedy is taking more from Biden. He's taking some from Trump. He is. In a lot of the races, Trump is around 49, 47 or so. When you add in RFK, it goes down to the low 40s, mid 30s, but Biden falls more than that. So there absolutely is a Kennedy effect, but it's hurting Biden more. Now, who are the Democrats who are going to Kennedy? One, it is people who are passionate Hamas supporters, who are upset with Joe Biden being friendly to Israel. The other are protest votes of people who are mad at Biden for various things, and right now they say they're going to Kennedy. Democrats have a working theory that may be right, that in some cases, the voters who right now are saying they're going for Kennedy at the ballot box will come home to Biden to stop Trump. I don't know if that's the case. That's their working theory. We'll see if it happens. 877-973-7425. We have other big news that we need to discuss. The TikTok legislation has passed the House of Representatives. Now, I got an email the other day. In fact, I want to pull up the email. I don't want to disparage the guy. Let me see if I can find where it was. I replied to the guy's email. He's a listener who's emailed on occasion. And this actually, I think, is worth me reading to you because I suspect that some of you likewise have a similar situation. Yes. All right. So I got an email from a listener the other day. I listen to the podcast. I know almost every day and thoroughly enjoy your perspectives most of the time. However, this TikTok thing is a little annoying. As I'm sure you yourself have never been on TikTok, I actually have. Seen a TikTok, I have, or even know what the TikTok app looks like, I do. It is frustrating when you presume to tell people like myself that use TikTok on a daily basis for entertainment and time-passing purposes about what's on TikTok. Are there pro-Palestinian TikToks? Absolutely. Are there pro-Biden, anti-Trump TikToks? Absolutely. But there are also just as many pro-Israel and pro-Trump TikToks. As for the spying, it makes me very suspicious when public figures worry so much about what they do on their phones and who might find out. I, for one, could give two blankety blanks if the Chinese communists know what kind of porn I watch or know that I enjoy looking at the female backside. So maybe the people up in arms about that should actually be examining themselves. Luke 12:2-3. That was him to me. And again, I'm not going to give names. I don't mean to disparage him, but I suspect there are none. In his Luke 2:3 reference, 12:2-3, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Therefore, whatsoever you have spoken in darkness shall be heard in the light. That which you have spoken in the ear and in closets shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. Here's the problem with this. We have a growing body of evidence from our intelligence community that shows a deeply disturbing and sinister pattern of collaboration between TikTok's parent company ByteDance and China. In fact, ByteDance is based in China. They say TikTok is headquartered in Singapore. Actually, ByteDance is a Chinese communist country that is bound by the National Intelligence Law of 2017 and the Counterespionage Law of 2014 in China. It must cooperate with intelligence requests by the People's Republic of China and hand over requested evidence for investigations. This is CNN from June 8th, 2023. In what appears to be a first, a former employee of ByteDance, TikTok's Beijing-based parent company, has outlined specific claims that the Chinese Communist Party accessed the data of TikTok users on a broad scale and for political purposes. In a court filing this week, the former employee of ByteDance, Yintao Yu, alleged that the CCP spied on pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong in 2018 by using backdoor access to TikTok to identify and monitor the activists' locations and communications. Also from Bloomberg from August 15th, 2022, China's internet giants from Tencent Holdings to ByteDance, parent company of TikTok, have shared details of their prized algorithms with Beijing for the first time, an unprecedented move aimed at curbing data abuse that may end up compromising closely guarded corporate secrets. The Internet Watchdog on Friday published a list describing 30 algorithms that firms including Alibaba and Meituan employ to gather data on users, tailor personal recommendations, and serve up content. While the public list stopped short of revealing the actual code, it wasn't clear the extent to which internet firms may have revealed their underlying software to regulators in private. The algorithms that decide which TikTok videos, WeChat posts, and Instagram photos users see are considered the secret sauce of many companies. China adopted regulations in March that require the firms to hand over their algorithms. TikTok has complied. Here is Ted Cruz on CNBC this morning.
Well, it depends. It depends what the bill specifically says. I will say this. I'm glad the House is acting. I am deeply concerned about TikTok. I've been very vocal about my concerns in TikTok. We had the CEO of TikTok testify before the Judiciary Committee just a few weeks ago, and I vigorously question him. Really on two fronts I'm concerned about TikTok. Number one, I'm concerned about Chinese surveillance and espionage. TikTok is controlled by the Chinese Communist government. It has 170 million users in the United States, and it gives the Chinese government the ability to monitor, number one, what they're saying, number two, their physical location using GPS, number three, potentially what they're searching for and what they're doing with their phone. All of that is concerning. We also know that China has used it to target journalists in particular, going after them on TikTok. That's one set of concerns. A second set of concerns is the propaganda that the Chinese government pushes on TikTok and pushes in particular at kids. And I think it is deeply, deeply harmful. You know, you look right now at the Israel-Hamas war that is unfolding. Every age cohort of Americans, when asked, who's in the right? Who do you side with? Overwhelmingly, Americans side with Israel, except for one age cohort, and that is 18 to 29. And we see TikTok in particular pushing pro-Hamas propaganda. I think it is deliberate. I think that is designed by the Chinese government. And so I'm glad the House is acting to address what I think are very serious risks.
That was Ted Cruz again talking on CNBC this morning. Jimmy, listen, I don't think the Chinese do care what porn you're looking at, to quote your email to me. I don't actually think they do. What I do think, however, is that they care deeply about your children if you have children. And they are trying to backdoor propagandize to your kids. I mean, for example, so Jacob Hellberg is a member of a congressional research panel called the U.S.-China Economic Security Review Commission. They've been doing research on TikTok, and it turns out that you are 67 times more likely, according to the Wall Street Journal, 67 times more likely to see pro-Hamas propaganda in a fresh algorithm on TikTok than you are pro-Israel propaganda. That's a choice in TikTok's algorithm, because as emailer Jimmy notes, there's plenty of pro-Israel propaganda, but you get a fresh TikTok account, you're 67 times more likely to see pro-Hamas propaganda. Not only that, we know that China has already used TikTok to monitor and spy on journalists and others. This isn't a hypothetical, it's real. This legislation has passed the House. It goes to the Senate. Whose side are you on here? Ted Cruz or, well, Ilhan Omar?
We just had one of your Democratic colleagues, Congressman Moskowitz, on the show last night. He suggested that, for example, when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war, that China is using TikTok's algorithms to ramp up divisions in this country. And that's one of the concerns that he has in terms of national security. Do you think there's any validity to that?
What I do think that people are finding discomfort is the fact that for the first time in our nation's history, Americans have access to real images of the horrors that are experienced by Palestinians daily. And the onslaught that is taking place, this horrific assault on Gaza, really is being streamed to every single person here in this country. So we no longer have to rely on legacy media to get.
Notice she doesn't want to actually answer the question because she can't combat the data. It's true. Now, Thomas Massie, the congressman from Kentucky, he claims there's a backdoor in the legislation that will allow the government to take over any website and shut it down for election disinformation. Thomas Massie is a recipient of large donations from Jeff Yass. Jeff Yass is the ByteDance investor who has persuaded Kellyanne Conway and Donald Trump to change their minds on TikTok. He's heavily invested in TikTok and opposes the legislation. He's donated to Rand Paul. He's donated to Thomas Massie. He's donated to the Club for Growth. It's not surprising that these libertarians who he's donated to are coming out against it. What is surprising is that Thomas Massie is lying about the legislation, and he actually is lying about the legislation. And I'm not going to mince words here, even though I like the guy, it's a lie. The legislation is very clear. It only applies to websites that are controlled by Russia, China, and North Korea. It allows judicial review, and the controlling interest in the underlying companies relates to those countries. And even then, it doesn't actually allow a shutdown of the platforms. It would force divestment of control by Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Iran's in there as well. This isn't a free speech issue. This isn't about shutting down TikTok. Now, China has said, the Chinese Communist Party has said it would rather shut down TikTok than allow ByteDance or force ByteDance to sell it. So China would rather give up the billions of dollars that come from a sale. They'd rather give up those billions of dollars than have ByteDance give up control. Why? Because China controls ByteDance, which controls TikTok, which operates the surveillance app in the United States. It's curious to me that Jeff Yass, who would probably make a lot of money off of sale of TikTok, is opposed to it as well. Elon Musk, who makes a lot of money out of China, he's come out opposed to it. Tucker Carlson, who these days just seems to hate America, has come out against it. It is wild how these supposed conservatives on social media who blast the United States all the time are suddenly on the side of China and Russia all the time, predictably. This legislation that has now passed the House and goes to the Senate, Mark Warner and Marco Rubio have come out on it and support it after an intelligence briefing yesterday by the intelligence community. They've come out and said it needs to pass. It looks like it could pass the Senate. Joe Biden now says he'll sign into law. Just consider this. Just consider this. The legislation would only apply to applications and websites controlled by Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And it would not shut those websites down, but would force the divestment of controlling interest from those companies. That's it. That's what the legislation does. And if they refuse to divest, then the websites and apps would be shut down, but they could have a judicial appeal to show that these countries don't have the controlling interest in the companies. You do have to begin to wonder why these people are on the side of Ilhan Omar in China. Why they're mischaracterizing the legislation. Why they're mischaracterizing what TikTok does. TikTok is a massive surveillance app by the Chinese Communist Party against the United States and Western powers. It absolutely should be shut down. Now, I got to tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You need to fire up the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, not shut it down. You get 3 of them for less than $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. What are they? They are air purifiers, but they're magical air purifiers that wipe out odors as well. You can hold these things in the palm of your hand, plug them up with a USB cord, or you can plug it up directly into the wall. You can plug it up in a car with the USB outlet. I've done it in a car. It was a rental car, smelled like smoke of some variety, strongly smelled, and my mom thought the car had run over a skunk. No, Mom, somebody was smoking something in the car. Fired up the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, wiped out those odors, literally eliminated the odors. The car smelled fresh and clean. I use it. I travel in my travel bag. If somebody's been smoking in a hotel room before me, the Eden Pure wipes it out. You get 3 of them for less than $200. They're filterless. They use electrostatic plates. You can just wipe them out. It's fantastic. EdenPureDeals.com. Use the discount code ERIC3, E-R-I-C-K, the number 3, at EdenPureDeals.com. You get 3, one for upstairs, downstairs, your basement, your attic, your RV, your travel bag, wherever you need them. Get 3 of them for less than $200. EdenPureDeals.com is the website. The discount code ERIC3, E-R-I-C-K3. They just work. This hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan nationwide. If you're buying a building, you're building a building, you're buying a franchise, things for your business, reach out to them. They might be able to help you. They make their own lending decisions, and they have since the 1990s. And let me just say this. So I've known the Frost family for years. They're good people. They run First Liberty Building and Loan. If you're like me, you may have a relationship with a bank, and then one day you go in and the banker's gone, and now you got to build a brand new relationship with someone else who doesn't know you. The Frost family, once they get to know you, they're going to be around. So if you're a business and you want a reliable lending partner, FirstLibertyGA.com. Go check them out, FirstLibertyGA.com. Spend 10 minutes with them. See if they're a fit for you. See if you're a fit for them. Well, one person who decided he was no longer fit for Congress is Ken Buck, the congressman from Colorado.
So, Congressman Buck, talk to me about a bit what has frustrated you so much about this era of politics, and particularly Congress. What's made it so difficult?
You really need me to say that. You need me to explain what's so difficult about this place. I was, as you see, the number 3 in seniority on that committee, and I asked questions last. And you need me to explain what is so complicated about that, or how we try to impeach somebody for a difference in policy. We've taken impeachment and we've made it a social media issue as opposed to a constitutional concept. This place just keeps going downhill, and I don't need to spend my time here.
I want to defend Congressman Ken Buck, who I know and have known for a very long time. I used to go out to Colorado and do fundraisers for him when he was running for the Senate. Really desperately wanted him in the Senate, and it was one of the hardest losses I had, and he has been a conservative. You can't challenge Ken Buck's conservative record. But Ken Buck is an honest man and had no willingness to lie about 2020 and claim the election was stolen, and has been deeply frustrated by the carnival barker side of the GOP in the last couple of years that wants to do things for show, and it's a lot of smoke and mirrors to mask incompetence, and he's done with it. And good for him for recognizing that it's now a clown show, and he wants no part of a clown show. He's a serious man who's not going to waste his time. He is one of the great guys I had the privilege of backing for Congress, and it is a loss to Congress to lose a guy like Ken Buck, who is unquestionably conservative, and you love his record. And those of you who like Trump, you may not like him, but you should, because he's one of the good guys. And now he's gone, and that's a bad thing.